Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends of Tel Aviv University all around the world, as president of the German Friendship Association of Tel Aviv University, I'm happy and proud to host a very special event to whom I welcome you all around the world. Many greetings to our friends from North America, Canada, United States, over Europe, to those who view us from Israel. Shalom, Erev Tov, V'Bruchim Habayim. The question on how to present Jewish life today is a question in itself. Because is there a single Jewish life with all the plurality and diversity of the Jewish world? We will discuss that and see aspects of it. And we will first start with a virtual tour through the Jewish Museum here in Frankfurt, that the city renovated and enhanced this and had doubled the size of the exhibition halls over the past years. Why did the city of Frankfurt do it? Frankfurt is the most Jewish city in Germany. If we look on the contribution that Jewish families did over the centuries, there is no other city in Germany that much influenced positively in the development than Frankfurt is. The Frankfurt University, Goethe University, would not exist without the strong engagement of Jewish families back in the 20th century, when in 1914 this university was founded. And there are many other aspects of the city which make the city as a place of research, of culture, and of economy that would not be the same today if there were not the engagement of Jewish families in the past. Besides that, of course, we look at the darkest chapter of our city and of Germany. The time of the Shoah and the mass murder that was done there is part of our heritage and is part of our common responsibility for a better future. These all different aspects come together in a place that we will soon see at the Jewish Museum here in Frankfurt, which was the first Jewish museum when it was opened in 1988 here in Germany. And after the renovation and after the enhancement, it is today the most modern Jewish museum in the world. So I'm sure we will have an interesting evening. And afterwards, after the tour, we'll have a panel discussion with Professor Neumann from Tel Aviv University and Professor Wenzel. And so I also want to present those two with a few words. Professor Miriam Wenzel studied general and comparative literature, political science and theater studies in Berlin and at Tel Aviv University, so she's an alumni of Tel Aviv University. Afterwards, she worked as a research assistant at Ludwig Maximilians University in Munich and earned her doctorate with a dissertation on the Holocaust discourse in Germany in the 1960s. Miriam Wenzel is the author and co-editor of various books and exhibition catalogs on German Jewish art and cultural history. She is director of the Jewish Museum Frankfurt since 2016, and she is honorary professor at the Department of Jewish Studies at Goethe University Frankfurt, and she will serve as a visiting professor at Bauhaus University Weimar for the winter semester. The second panelist is Professor Erlan Neumann. He's an Israeli architect and architectural historian. Currently, he's the Dean of the Yolanda and David Katz Faculty of the Arts of Tel Aviv University. Between 2010 and 2018, Neumann headed the Azrieli School of Architecture at TAU. Under his directorship, the Azrieli School of Architecture emerged as one of Israel's leading architectural schools. I'm sure that this panel will be fruitful and interesting for all of us. I hope that we will again be able to meet in Israel at the beautiful spot of our Tel Aviv University soon. Otherwise, if you find the time and if Corona gives us all the possibilities to fly again, you're all welcomed here live and in person in Frankfurt at the Jewish Museum, which is the most modern Jewish museum in Europe. So we will all have, hopefully, and I'm sure, a great evening. And again, welcome to see you here. And I already say, see you in Frankfurt in live, in color, and in person. And now follow me with Professor Wenzel through this beautiful museum. Welcome to the place where the Jewish side of the city of Frankfurt is portrayed in a modern and in a very emotional way. And this is the Jewish Museum in Frankfurt, which was the first Jewish museum after World War II here, which was opened in Germany. And after the renovation, after the reopening, it has become the most modern Jewish museum in Europe. And in this city, this museum plays a very special role because Frankfurt is the most Jewish city in Germany, from the way Jewish families influence the development of the city and from the way that Jewish life has ever been part of the development of Frankfurt. And for that reason, I'm happy that the director of the Jewish Museum, Dr. Miriam Wenzel, takes time to present her house in a way that will make you curious, I hope. Thank you very much, Mrs. Dr. Wenzel, for being here. It is a very special place, and I'm proud and happy that you take your time to present me, to present the viewers, what makes this place so special. So what makes this home so special?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity and the introduction. I think what is special about the new Jewish Museum where we are standing is, first of all, the site. This is an historical site. You will get to know the Rothschild Palais, one of the houses where the Rothschild family was working. And this is the new building by Stab Architekten. So this site combines contemporary architecture and an historical, classicistic building in Louis XIV style. So this kind of tension between the contemporary and the old, this is one part of what is new.
There is a huge history of Jewish life represented on this spot and linked to different other parts of the city where you can really see from the history to the contemporary time. And the words at the reopening where we are now, and this is a strong commitment to Jewish life, not just looking to the past, but looking to the roots, of course, and the tree in front of this wonderful museum in this combination of roots and what has get lost, and what is the future, is really a statement, I think. So what made you saying we are now?
This museum opened in 1988. And in 1988, the perspective on Jewish life was that it is past. So this museum was kind of commemorating the glorious parts of Jewish life in this town. We have a completely different situation now. Due to the immigration of Russian-speaking Jewry, about 220,000 Jews migrated in the 90s. There is a contemporary, vivid, plural Jewish life in Germany today. And this is what we as a museum feel committed to. And we also have a change in perspective. We don't look on Jewish culture. We are a platform for Jewish culture, for this plurality, for this vivid contemporary life. So you will find different voices, different perspectives, different stories in our exhibition. And at the same time, we are putting an emphasis on the now because we think there is something dramatically changing in society in our days, and we have to take a stand as a Jewish museum and address these changes.
Well, this is a wonderful house here to represent Jewish life in Frankfurt. This is the center of also satellites that are representing Jewish life at other places in the city. Perhaps you can explain our viewers also what are these roles of these satellites towards the center.
I'm always saying we have 2 locations and 3 platforms, the third platform being the internet, but the other location is Museum Judengasse. And that is situated on the site of the first Jewish ghetto in Europe, which was on the decision of the city government, against the will of the Jewish community at that time, erected outside of the medieval town in 1462, 50 years before Venice. And there happened to be the remnants of 5 houses, where you can see the size of the houses and all that. And at this site, in these remnants, this is our museum Judengasse, where we present Jewish life in early modern times. Frankfurt was the center of Jewish life then. It was known for scholarship, known for its Talmud, known for its traditions. And we try to present these Judengasse times as a kind of ambivalent civil autonomous time where the community was flourishing, but at the same time was forced to live in those walls. Right in front there is the oldest Jewish cemetery of this town, the oldest gravestone coming from 1272, and it happens to be the second oldest Jewish cemetery north of the Alps. So that is included in our tour over there, and there is a memorial site, the Bernplatz Memorial, commemorating the names of 12,000 Jews that were deported and murdered from Frankfurt. So it's always combined. There is always the civilizatorial bridge that is a kind of in front of whatever we do, and there is the task to commemorate, and at the same time we'd like to open a new perspective on the glorious times, both in modernity and in early modern times at both locations.
Oh, I think we all have become very curious about learning more about what is happening here, and so we take a walk, and the one who's telling the people what is going on.
Yes,
Thank you.
I will do. So this is the first room of our new permanent exhibition. The permanent exhibition here in the Rothschild Palais is on 3 floors, and it has a title, and the title is "We Are Now Jewish Frankfurt, from Enlightenment Until Today." And this first room is dedicated to the present.
So this is now.
This is now. I'm holding this in my hand since some minutes already, and this is a gadget which we developed particularly for this permanent exhibition for our visitors. You get it with the entrance card, and what you can do is you can collect throughout the exhibition items that you might want to see once again after your visit. You put it on here, this gadget, which has the form of a bookmark, and then it opens in a certain realm of our website, which you can only enter with a personalized code. It opens whatever you collected. In this case, it collected the films and the interviews we did over here, so that you can watch them once again at home, show it to your wife. And in other cases, it opens, for instance, when you want to do further research, like on questions of restitutions, for instance, or you may want to hear a song that is from the cantor book that we put on display. And these kind of offerings are connected with this item called Museum to Go, which was developed uniquely for this exhibition.
So I can take Jewish life back to my home with this gadget.
That's the idea. The idea is that you stay connected with what you saw here, you can deepen it, and you also stay connected with others.
This looks impressive. What do we see right here?
This is a Torah shrine, And the Torah shrine that comes from the building, the IG Farben building, where now is the university, and which happened to be the US headquarters, the military US headquarters. And for the Jewish GIs, the Torah school were kept in this Torah shrine, which was at the same time used as an altar for the Christian GIs. So it had a double function, it has two sides. And what really matters when we talk about the question, why is Frankfurt today, again, the center of Jewish life? Or as you say, the most Jewish town in Germany, it really matters that this was the headquarters of the US Army after World War II. And under the protection of the US Army, Jews either managed to build a new life, opened bars, opened businesses, were living in the displaced person camp of Zeitz later on in the city. So there was a protection shield by the US Army, and there were also Jewish GIs. So right after the war, a new kind of Jewish life emerged here by persons that were not living here before the war, but that were building up something new. And this Torah shrine matters for this story.
In this beautiful museum, we also see Jewish life portrayed in very different ways, different colors. Oppenheim, the painter of the Rothschild, to many other artists. What do we see right here now?
This is the Oppenheim room, obviously. It's all paintings by Oppenheim, with one exception. And what we are telling here is the story of emancipation. Oppenheim was the first Jewish painter that received an academic education, and he painted this monumental Moses painting at the Academia in Munich. And what I think is crucial here is the fact that he portrays Moses as an enlightened figure. Vice versa, like for instance the most known Moses by Michelangelo, who has horns. So there is a slight differences in the paintings that you see here. Most of them have motifs that we know from Christian art history. And what Oppenheim does over the time is he portrays little differences. And with these little differences, like in your back, the vanishing of the cross and of the holy shrine, whatever you call it, introduces a Jewish perspective on biblical subject, which at that time, we are 19th century, were dominated totally by the Christian perspective. So this is the last room of our permanent exhibition, and it's devoted to family Frank, the family of Anne Frank, who happened to live in Frankfurt for generations. And here we are telling, let's say, the cultural background of Anne Frank. We are telling the family history, and what is unique about this room is we are the only museum worldwide that has original artifacts from the family belonging. So whatever you see here belongs to the family of Anne Frank, and we tell the story of this family with these original documents and original belongings. And what we see here is, first of all, a painting by Jacob Nussbaum. He was one of the most known Impressionist painters before the Second World War, a Frankfurt Jewish painter, and he painted the Opernplatz, the square before the opera. And the grandfather of Anne Frank, and the grandmother too, they happened to have a private bank right at this square. And so the grandmother emigrated to her daughter to Basel. And because she emigrated in 1931, she could take belongings with her. And she took this, for instance, this painting with her. And what you see over here on this photograph is that the painting was right in the saloon in the House of Basel at the center.
Oh.
So the memory of Frankfurt past was kept right at the core of the new house.
Amazing. We see a typewriter here, and I heard at least some guests were asking if this is the typewriter where Anne Frank was writing her diary. But of course, everybody sees that she was writing with her pencil. But what makes this typewriter so amazing?
This typewriter belonged to her father, Otto Frank. And on this typewriter, he was answering all the letters that he received, especially from students and young people reacting on the diary once it was published. And what is important to know is that Otto Frank is an Auschwitz survivor. He was the only person who survived from all the people that were hiding. And when he came back to Amsterdam, he was initiating a search for his daughters. He knew that his wife was murdered, but he still thought that Anna and Margot would survive. And then his former secretary, Miep, who helped them hiding, she gave him the diary. And so when he started reading the diary, of course he couldn't read it all through because it was very emotional for him. He was contacting different persons also from the family whether he should publish it, because that was the wish of Anne Frank. And it wasn't easy for him to find a publishing house at first, but in 1946 this was the first edition, written in Dutch language, which he published as an editor, and it became very successful. It was translated in other languages, and he initiated a theater play, and later on also a movie. And since the diary became more and more known, he received all kinds of writings from people who read it and who were really touched. And over here you see these kind of letters that he received, and there were so many that they needed this kind of I don't really know how to call it in English, a box to actually bring it to the house. And so this is, let's say, the story of the diary, at the core, the first edition, and this is the typewriter on which he was answering to all those letters.
Okay, so after we have done this virtual tour through the Jewish Museum in Frankfurt, now I have with me the two panelists that I already introduced at the beginning. I'm happy and proud to welcome Mrs. Professor Miriam Wenzel, Director of the Jewish Museum, and on the other side, Professor Anne Neumann, the Dean of the Yolanda and David Katz Faculty of the Arts of Tel Aviv University. Welcome to both of you. Shalom.
Thank you. תודה רבה, שלום.
Well, how to present Jewish life today? That is what we want to discuss here, and we already have seen how it is presented and shown in Frankfurt. So besides the normal protocol and that we normally have ladies first, as we already did the two, I would start with Professor Anne Neumann about his views, his ideas, and his comments on how to present Jewish life today. So, Professor Neumann, I'm curious about your ideas.
First, thank you very much for this invitation, and thank you for this wonderful tour. I think the museum is, congratulations for this museum. I think it's a wonderful building. I myself an architect, and I was very much impressed by the ways in which the Stab architect, Volker Stab, integrated the old building with a new building. I think this is also for itself symbolizes a lot in terms of presenting Jewish life, that it's not only about the past, but it's also about the present. And I think this is what the museum in Frankfurt is emphasizing. And I think it's very important to emphasize the Jewish life is something alive and has many aspects. As Professor Wenzel mentioned, it has, there is a lot of immigration, Jewish immigrants to Frankfurt today. And I think the role of the museum is also to show the complexity of Jewish life today. So I think, and I have to apologize. I haven't had the chance, of course, with COVID-19, I couldn't do it, but I haven't had the chance to visit the museum. This is one of the first places I will visit after I'll be able to get to Germany. But I think, just taking up on contemporary issues, I think it's very important for a Jewish museum today.
Well, thank you. Professor Wenzel, when you guided me through your new home, your new house, it was amazing to see how it is presented. And perhaps you can again a little bit point out the philosophy behind this great new Frankfurt Jewish Museum.
Well, the philosophy has a lot to do with the architecture, and I'm really pleased that Stab Architect had such a brilliant idea in the combination of, a decisive contemporary building on the one hand, and a restored historical building, and in building a relation between those two, because these relations between, the history and the contemporary. This is what our museum work is about. Where are the relations? Where are the echoes? And where is the breach? Because we always have to deal with the breach. And I think that the architecture does this in a very brilliant way. And Volker Stab had this expression that this is a protected openness. First of all, for security reasons, of course, but on the other hand, also in the way when you enter the building, it opens all kinds of views to the city, to the sky, and so this kind of protected openness is something that is very symbolic for our museum work. We conceive ourselves as a museum without walls. Which means that for us, the digital realm, for instance, is very important. The work that we do outside of our building is important, and we want to reach out to new audiences, get them involved in our topics, because that's what we think makes us meaningful for today. And the building helps us in becoming concise on that concept. And that concept has very much to do with Jewish life today, here in Frankfurt, which is both, on the one hand, a self-confident, plural community, and Jewish life outside of the community, with a lot of faces, a lot of outspoken personalities, and on the other hand, a life under threat. And So both kind of approaches matter for our permanent exhibition, and we try to offer multiple perspectives on Jewish life today, and try to tell stories, different stories, historical stories, so that people can either empathize or engage with what they see, because that's what we think is crucial. Is that visitors feel encouraged to think about themselves and about their own kind of historical luggage they carry with them, and get involved and feel responsible in the non-Jewish world for actually a society where we interact with each other in a respectful way with all our differences.
When it comes to the question already of the motto of today's event, presenting Jewish life, and you spoke, Dr. Wenzel, about the plurality, the diversity even within Jewish life. So, Professor Neumann, when you also come from the architecture, when you present or trying to present what people should see as Jewish, what is your view? What is your approach, and how do you transfer it?
Well, as a matter of fact, it's an excellent question, but as a matter of fact, it's very difficult because, of course, Jewish life is very complex, and each one may interpret it in his or her own way. And in that respect, I think that the Jewish museums as a subcategory within ethnographic museums are very important also for Israelis. I think that Israelis should, of course, when you live in Israel, most of the society here is Jewish. So, but when you go abroad, and it happened for me, I lived for several years in Los Angeles, where I got my master's and PhD. And then I realized that there's the other opportunities to conduct a Jewish life, and they get different forms when they're outside of Israel, and they're all valid. You can be Jewish in many ways. And I think this is something that's why I think on the one hand, these kind of museums are also important for the Jewish people around the world globally, not only for the local communities, but also to project globally for the Jewish people here in Israel, but also elsewhere, that there are other opportunities. So I really hope that this kind of, that first, as far as I could see, I think the museum, through the storytelling of personal narratives, conveys different ways of living, being a Jewish, conducting Jewish life on the one hand, and then I hope that it will resonate and create some kind of connections with other Jewish museums, other Jewish communities worldwide.
As we already learned that you will be one of the next guests coming to Frankfurt and visit the Jewish Museum. What would be your personal expectations? What would be the issues where we will look at, and what questions would you carry in your suitcase to Frankfurt before walking into the Jewish Museum?
Well, personally, of course, as an architect and as a curator in the museum, I curated several exhibitions. I'm interested to see the ways in which Jewish life is presented, the techniques, but this is something that is interested for me personally. But besides that, as I said, I'm curious. I've been to Germany, of course, many times, and also to Frankfurt, but I'm curious to see what's unique about Jewish life in Frankfurt. Let's say for young adults, how are they coping with Jewish life today, given with what's happening in Europe politically and socially? How do they define their lives? And of course, the elderly, how they relate to that. On the other hand, and of course, one cannot neglect or resist mentioning and dealing with the Jewish past of in Europe. So I would expect that, but as I said, from the short video and from what I've seen online, I think that the museum does it very well.
Professor Wenzel, how do you deal with the expectations, and how do you put them into the whole picture of the museum in Frankfurt?
I would like first to come back to something you said about us being an ethnographic museum. I strongly doubt that.
Okay.
I'm trying as much as we are not defining what is Jewish. We don't define. I mean, we have a broad point of view on that. As much we are not, I wouldn't categorize us as neither an ethnographic nor an historical museum. I think our strength is that we are an ethnographic museum, an historical museum, a cultural historical museum, and an art museum. And we are all this together, and we are a community museum, and we present subjectivities through subjectivities. We present stories of migration and stories of long delays. So, you know, we have all these kind of categories come somehow together in our museum, and I think that's a strength in our work. Well, when it comes to expectations, it's something that really matters in the process of our redefinition, because I mean we've been closed for 5 years, and in these 5 years we took the chance to actually reach out to our audiences and get them involved in the conceptualization. So we were presenting our new museum on pop-up platforms that we were doing in the city, and to get in contact. So we were asking, like, what do you see when you see, you know, these objects? How do you relate to this? And so we tried to find out more, what are the interests of our audiences? And we kept on doing that also online. And I feel that that helped us, you know, shaping an idea about what the expectations are. And they are, of course, very, very different. But what is always a strong expectation is that we are seen as a platform for contemporary Jewish life, and that people want to get in contact. The non-Jewish world sees us as, you know, a bridge or a platform to get in contact and to get to know more about contemporary Jewish life.
Well, may I ask Mr. Becker? I just want to ask one, Professor Wenzel, question. I completely agree with you. I subscribe to your point of view on the fact that a living museum doesn't have to take a one point of view. And if you're talking about Jewish life, of course, is combined, is based on different aspects. It has, you know, some of them has to do with ethnography and daily life and art and so on and so forth. So I think that this is absolutely the right approach. But I think that in order to become a substantial and important institution, a museum has to raise or deal not from a populist point of view, but it has to do with burning questions. And I wonder what are the burning questions for Jewish people in Frankfurt, and how do you deal with that?
Well, I mean, first of all, I would say Frankfurt is part of Germany. So we are dealing with the echoes of the Shoah. And the echoes of the Shoah are in Jewish families. You know, it's part of your memory. It's part of how you're shaped. They are not in the non-Jewish world necessarily. So we are dealing with this difference. That's what I mean when I'm saying for us it's important to that our visitors are starting to reflect upon themselves and about their own luggage. I mean, the non-Jewish visitors, because we are dealing with personal stories. We are presenting personal stories to make people reflect on their own personal stories. And that's a very strong part, I think, of our task. Of course, we are dealing with the present of growing anti-Semitism, and I would love to be in a situation that other museums take up these questions too, because I really think it's a question of the majority society, but I'm of course always addressed for dealing with this question. What we are presenting is actually forms of Jewish forms of reactions and of dealing with anti-Semitic projections and violence over the history. That's another contemporary task. And then we are trying to, you may call it empowerment, or part of our task is also to somehow maybe bring back a perspective of pride, of a very unique history, and of encouragement to shape the future of the Jewish community here, or Jewish presence in Europe. And I think that's part. It's also the last sentence of our mission statement is we are acting in the social realm, the digital realm, in order to shape or help shaping a future where Jews in Europe still want to keep on living and shaping their societies. And so that's, I think that's our task.
When we walked through the museum together, and we already pointed out that this is now with the focus on the new and enhanced part of the Jewish Museum, that there's also the satellite at the former Jewish Alley, which presents, let's say, the whole history over decades and centuries before. And of course, the link in a very strong way, especially in a city like Frankfurt, as I said, the most Jewish city in Germany, with the contribution of Jewish families to the development of the city, shows that on the one side, we have to present and deal with the darkest chapter of German and Frankfurt history, the Shoah, and what has been done as crimes here in and in the name of the city of Frankfurt and by Frankfurters to their neighbors, in a way that people learn from today on about the responsibility that comes out of it. And at the same time, not only reducing Jewish life on the time of the Shoah, but when we celebrate this year 1700 years of Jewish life in Germany, with all the difficult parts of pogroms and things that have been done to Jewish people here over centuries, but focusing that Jewish life is much more and much richer and stronger influenced the life and development of the country. And all this is all part of the story that is told, I think.
Yes, you're right. I mean, I also think, for me, I was thinking a lot about the local, because we are a museum, a communal museum funded by the city of Frankfurt. And so our focus in our permanent exhibition is on Frankfurt, Jewish history and culture. But at the same time, we tell a European story. It's really a European story, because that's the story of those families that live here. They came from all over Europe and migrated and came back, and it was the whole network was a European network. So I feel that the perspective that we are trying to emphasize is that Frankfurt was a center of Jewish life for 800 years. A very meaningful center in the Jewish world. It's not that known in the non-Jewish world that it was like that, and Jews shaped the development of the city. But at the same time, this was always an initially European place, because of its Jewish life or Jewish community. And so when I'm trying to also think about what is our relation to other Jewish museums, I'm saying, like, actually, I think we are a European Jewish museum in Frankfurt, and that's the perspective.
I think it's very clear with your presentation of the Anne Frank family material that that this is a family who started from Frankfurt and then just dispersed all around Europe. So I guess this is the right way to think, because Europe, there's as a continent, has to deal with the issues of course of the Shoah, and which it it dominates anything that has to do with Jewish life. It's such an immense event on the one hand, but then the fact that Jewish people migrated, as you said, between different communities, among different communities in Europe, I think this is the right way to see. And again, from my perspective as an Israeli born, I think the relationship to Europe is always very interesting and important to understand the Jewish life as a whole.
As Professor Neumann, as you are an expert, especially, of course, also for architecture that commemorates the Holocaust, you're internationally an internationally accepted expert for that. And when you are dealing with new forms of the architecture of commemorating Holocaust, there are still movements, there are still debates in countries, in places all around the world, how, especially, of course, in Germany, within Europe, to create such architecture, such monuments. What are the thoughts that you integrate in your personal ideas, and what you try then to transfer, to bring over the story, or to bring over the idea that gets out of this terrible crimes that have been done in that time, and to come to a form of commemorating and feeling what that means for us today, or for people today, perhaps?
Well, it's very interesting when you look on Holocaust commemoration, specifically through architecture, because the Holocaust was commemorated as effectively during the time when the crimes took place. People were starting to think about means of commemoration. But in any case, when you think about it in terms of architecture, there are two main venues to accomplish it. One's by monuments, and another one is by museum. Of course, museum is, in a way, is a much more complex way to commemorate the Holocaust, because it also deals with narratives, with text, with visual, and not only with the object, with the form itself, not only materially. And when you examine Holocaust museum throughout and their development throughout the years, you see that they've been developing and they changed and usually adapted the architectural style of each and every period in which they were generated. And for me, it was interesting to see how Holocaust commemoration and what's the moral that has to be understood through the architecture that is trying to memorialize or to commemorate the Holocaust. So, for instance, when you look at Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, because each museum, as I'm sure that Professor Wenzel will agree with me, each museum is a cultural product, and it always reflects the community, the culture that produced it. So, for instance, when you look at Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, it's fascinating to see that. I mean, initially the fact that the decision of the leadership in Israel, and I'm talking in the early 50s, was to decide to create a landscape campus that would be for commemoration, and not a building, but something that will be territorial and will be engraved within the territory. So this is part of the culture in a society that has that the issue of territory is not defined. I think that the means to commemorate the Holocaust through territory, through landscape, I think it's part of its pathology. The same thing that if you look at the house of the ghetto fighters in the kibbutz in the north of Israel, the fact that they call it a house, a museum, which is a house in which, of course, you call your museum also as a house, but a house for the Shoah, I think it's also, and this is a museum that was generated by survivors of the Holocaust, mainly of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, and for them it was important to create a house for the Shoah. And of course, when you look in America, it's a different story. In Germany, it's a different story. Poland is also is a very complex story. But I think it's interesting to see the cultural context in which each and every museum was generated, and the ways in which architects were using their tools to represent this horrific event.
Focusing on the entrance of your museum, Professor Wenzel, we see this monument, we see the trees, we see the roots. Can you again just focus from what Professor Neumann just said on what the whole environment, the whole place in front of the museum, together in combination with the house itself, is saying to the people that come to it?
I was just thinking about that, because of course in Germany, I mean, the museum that commemorizes what happens is the Jewish Museum Berlin. I mean, that has this stunning and speaking symbolic architecture, whereas our house is refusing symbolism. It has a slight symbolism with this kind of openness to the sky and all that, and it's not that defined. And it's part of the concept is that Stabarchitekten is saying, well, you as a museum maker need to define this building. But what is speaking and very poetic is the sculpture of Ariel Schlesinger. He's rather young Jerusalem-born artist, and he developed his first sculpture in open space for us, and that's right at the entrance square, and it shows. It comes from two trees built in aluminium, and one tree is holding the other tree in the crown, and the roots are pointing to the sky of the upper tree. So it has a very strong symbolism, and it's a very speaking sculpture. You may for me it relates to to exile and immigration, forced immigration, to the question whether Jewish life here in Frankfurt and the whole of Europe after what happened will flourish again or not. It relates to that we are connected and hold each other and need to hold each other, and so there is a whole, and of course it relates to the whole metaphor of tree in the Hebrew Bible and the tree of life. So there is lots of meaning, and what I really like about sculpture is that it's a kind of open for everyone. Actually, today we are starting a whole kind of lightening on the outside, because we still can't open. So we're going to light the tree and invite people to give comments on that and share their thoughts with us.
If I want just one thing, guys, that I may add regarding the building, from what I've seen, I think the fact that Stab Architect decided to create a monolithic building, which in a way is more mute, because of course you can think about the Daniel Libeskind's Jewish Museum in Berlin, which is so elaborated and so dominant. And I think the fact that you create something that is more kind of mute, you allow it to absorb many interpretations and modes of operation within it, and in a way it gives you much more possibility to create to present different narratives within the museum. So I think in that respect, of course, it's not that I'm against architecture which is dominant and says something very clear, but in other circumstances, I think it's also interesting to see some architecture that tries to fade itself, and this is actually part of the German tradition of architecture, which had to do with one of the greatest modernist architects was Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, of course, a German-born architect who then immigrated to the US, and he was talking a lot of time about the fact that architecture has to be transparent, not only literally but also conceptually. In the fact that it has to be there, but not to be there. And when you achieve this kind of mastery, you can do a building that is there. Of course, building has to have walls and entrances and windows and so on and so forth. But at the end, if the building becomes transparent, doesn't interfere with what with its function, I think this is a high level of mastery in architecture.
Interesting that you say so, because I think this building has, you are absolutely right with this nude or even something modest. There is something modest, I think, about it. And on the other hand, it really works with stunning details. I mean, there is like this tension between, you know, the wood and the beton and the cold and the warm and the Rothschild Palais and the new building. You know, there is, but you need to, and you feel it. Or you always feel it, but you need to look twice to get the point. It's not imposing upon the visitor a certain meaning or as a museum maker, that's kind of liberating, you know. And I still have the feeling like we're going to discover this building over the next years. You know, live with it, discover it, redefine it again and again.
Yeah.
So there's more place for more than one flight from Tel Aviv to Frankfurt. You can use as a moment when Corona reopens the skies, or better, we reopen the skies after or with Corona in a certain time. There's a lot to be discussed even more. The 30 minutes that we have used are already over. And so it's just like an appetizer in getting more into these issues that you both were as experts just speaking about. And when we speak about next year in Jerusalem, we can perhaps say that over next year Frankfurt, or next year in Frankfurt, as a place where these fruitful discussions can be continued, where all of you back at home in Canada, North America, here in Europe, or in Israel have followed our discussion, our panel here. I'm sure you also get curious to come and visit and see this unique place. Like we are all curious to get back and fly to Israel and visit Tel Aviv University, the place where the future of the country is developed, where much more is done for the prosperous of the world, for the contribution of the rising societies. And so we both can benefit from those fruitful discussions that we have just done here to the question how to present Jewish life today. I'm sure there are many more ideas. And we wish all that we come from this digital world. Would be another issue, how digitalization affects museums, and it's another unique spot that you can follow here in Frankfurt, see how the story is told in the 21st century. But we're looking forward to meet each other in the real world again, either here in Frankfurt or at Tel Aviv University. So thank you to both of you for having the time here. And thank you all back at home or wherever you have seen this virtual tour and the panel discussion. Stay strong and healthy. Bye-bye, and see you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.